Welcome to Dialogue Weekend. I'm Xu Qinduo. Hong Kong on Thursday held various events to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China and the 24th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to the motherland. Meanwhile, 1 year has passed since the national security law took effect in Hong Kong. So how is the city's social and economic life looking? Will it continue to flourish as a global financial center and one country, two systems? And what to expect from the three major elections in the coming year? To answer these questions and more, I'm joined by Lawrence Ma, barrister and chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation, and He Jing, attorney at Ji Yin Law. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. We'll start with Lawrence here. 1 year has passed since the implementation of this national security law. So what visible changes have been achieved or have you witnessed, Lawrence?
Oh, yes. The national security law has been if you call the basic law the most important law for Hong Kong, the national security law would be the second most important law for Hong Kong. It actually stabilized or put Hong Kong back into its right track for stabilizing the past riots and terrorist activities back in 2019. So that after the enactment of the national security law on the 30th of June 2020 last year, Hong Kong's society has been calm. I mean, there's been no large-scale riots. There has been no burning of shops and injuring of people, innocent people. So the general environment and society in Hong Kong has been very calm. There has been no large-scale protests or riots so far, which the national security law has achieved much of its objective.
Mm-hmm. Well, He Jing, obviously, sitting from Beijing, from the mainland point of view here, the central government's point of view, for example, stability is a key for the whole nation. So it's true for Hong Kong for future development. Without stability, it's just impossible. You don't have the environment to unleash the potential, whatever potential you have in Hong Kong over there. So in that sense, over the past year, so what do you see the national security law there?
I agree with Lawrence that this is national security law is really part of a constitutional law framework, right, for Hong Kong by being key part of to compatible with the basic law. So it's this is a very essential framework to maintain the law and the order that really gives this basic foundation for economy and the social development of Hong Kong. So as even when we see from Beijing, we think that that provides a very key essential element for Hong Kong society.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lawrence, in Hong Kong last week, actually, some of the officials mentioned about the Article 23. They say, it is imperative, basically, for Hong Kong to enact legislation on Article 23 of the Basic Law. But then people wonder, whether there is enough time to finish this legislation. Tell us, why is it so important to continue the work of basically enacting Article 23?
Well, yes, we need further power, the police particularly, more surveillance power to detect potential terrorist activities. If you understand that Hong Kong, just 2 days ago, there was a terrorist stepping at the back of a police officer and then committed suicide. Now that is something that we need to stop because, as I said before, the large-scale riots have been stopped, but the individual terrorism or people who have been a political fanatic who resort to violence on an individual basis, attacking individual police officers and government officials, those have to be stopped. Now, with the national security law hasn't been detailed enough in giving power, detailed surveillance power to the Hong Kong police force so that they can, for example, monitor the Facebook of the individuals so that to pick out people who are potentially resorting to violence against police. So if they have that information, they might be able to detain or arrest those potential culprits before the act was committed. So that sort of power would be very important, and I anticipated that Article 23 would have a comprehensive coverage of these surveillance power.
Obviously, He Jian, it still requires some time to truly achieve this stability and requires some extra work, for example, like Article 23. But despite that, what we have seen is, with the national security law, with the stability coming back, you can see Hong Kong economy, for example, the first quarter, it recorded a 7.9% year-on-year increase in GDP, basically ending this 6-month contraction. Looking into the future, He Jian, are you confident, are you optimistic about the future economically, financially of Hong Kong?
I personally am very confident about the future of Hong Kong. I think right now with the national security law in place, now people and investors, the enterprises, people have the confidence about how the business can be done, and that's very crucial. Now, right now, even though we are still in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, there are still a lot of restrictions. But people already seen that there are a ton of things that are happening right now. People now, in spite of all this discussion or controversy or concerns, right, from some part of the Western countries, but people are often ignored that the basic foundation of the legal framework, the common law framework in Hong Kong are still very, very strong. There's Hong Kong is still among the most free economy in the whole world. There's a lot of investments, capital coming into Hong Kong. And now if you think about the Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Macau, all this we call the Guangdong, all this southern China, the entire ecosystem are really running strong. So as soon as, especially after the border is open, people are probably going to really be present that how many opportunities are out there. And this is, I think, Hong Kong will play a bigger role in terms of capital markets or the trade system, everything. So I personally have a lot of confidence.
Well, to second your opinion, He Jian, if you look at the figures in the finance sector, for example, about $50 billion flowed to the banking system as of the end of last year. And in the first quarter, Hong Kong Exchange and Clearing Limited came third globally in terms of IPOs. So obviously there's the confidence from overseas investors in Hong Kong as a competitive and attractive global financial center. But Lawrence, if you look at this upcoming year, 3 elections will be there, for example, including election committee, legislative council, and the chief executive. What's the prospect of smooth elections, which obviously will further strengthen the stability and effectiveness of the governance in Hong Kong?
Yes, the 1,500 electoral committee members will be elected. They would be, many of them will have to pass the political threshold of being a patriot. You have to be a patriot, qualified to be a patriot. Being a patriot means that you have to love your country. What do you mean by loving your country? It means that you have to support the one country, two system. You have to support the return or resumption of Hong Kong back to the motherland. So that is something we understand as patriotism. So you have to be a patriot. You cannot collaborate with foreign powers to overthrow our own government or calling for sanctions of our governments. So patriots, you have to be a patriot before you can get past the threshold to qualify as an electoral committee member or to be elected. Now that is a requirement, and also to be a legislative councillor. You understand the legislative councillors back in the last term have been very destructive towards our legislative council business, and by filibusterings and all this, dragging on the business and not electing the chairman for certain committees. So the foreign powers have been using these proxies to go into our system, to be elected, and to try to overthrow or destabilize our system. So with this new political requirement that patriots have to run Hong Kong, with these new requirements being implemented, I would have thought that the political system in Hong Kong, whether they are the electoral committee members or whether the future legislative councillors, and including our chief executive, they will all be patriots, and that would be a very important implementation of our one country, two system.
Well, thank you, Lauren.